One thing that can really help add cohesion to your essays is when you have a good introduction and conclusion, and that those two really match up. So one of the ways that you can make sure that happens is if you have your introduction and conclusion paragraphs back to back and you're just looking at them together. So you'll notice that an introduction starts broadly and gets to a specific thesis, and the conclusion starts with the specific thesis and goes out broadly. So I think of the introduction as an upside down triangle that starts broadly, gets to the main point, the point of the upside down triangle. The conclusion is a right side up triangle with the point here and then getting broader and broader. So you can see that an introduction, and here's a question on the final exam, what are the parts of the introduction? And an introduction starts with a hook, then gives enough background or context for the thesis to make sense. This is true if you're writing about literature, if you're writing an argument, if you are doing a compare-contrast essay, any kind of those academic essays. Your thesis should be arguable. This is also a question on the final exam. So it should make a claim that someone could disagree with. And the body of your essay defends that claim throughout. All right, so let's look at an introduction. We want to see, do we have a hook? And we're not naming the work of literature in that hook. We're focused on just the theme. So our theme for this one is about making choices. And the lens through which we're going to view the characters of the novel is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So those two sentences sort of help develop that sort of basic idea. I could have made this second sentence green and it would have been fine. I could have made a juicier hook, which if you can do that well, that can really set a good tone for your whole essay. I have found that sometimes I'm so taken by a student's introductory paragraph that I seem to somehow overlook some of the mistakes in the body paragraph. So writing with your own personality in your introduction is super useful. You don't want to go overboard and just make the whole essay too jokey or anything, but you know, showing some of your own personality is always useful. I would say especially in the hook in the introduction and in the last part of the conclusion, which relates back to the hook. Another reason why these are good to have back to back to kind of check out that they really are responding. Each of these corresponding parts respond to each other. The second part of the introduction, I have said you should introduce the work that you are analyzing in a literary analysis. And then the thesis statement will be that arguable point, the thing that you're going to be proving with the body of the essay. Then the conclusion should restate the thesis in a new way. And initially, when I came up with these little very generic sample introduction and conclusion paragraphs, I realized looking at this thesis statement and this thesis statement, I did not have exactly an exact word or phrase, which is really important. I need an exact word or phrase in the thesis that I'm going to repeat or reiterate within both of these thesis statements. Sometimes my thesis statements look a little too much alike, so maybe I was trying to get away from that. But here I have revised, so I have something about conflict here, right here. And I didn't have anything about conflict in this thesis, so I added this little last phrase. So I did have needs sort of implied by talking about Maslow, but I didn't have in my head, I thought, well, I've talked about needs in the first thesis, and I really had not used that same word. So that's an important thing to remember. Also, in the main idea sentences, this is about the body of the essay. In your main idea sentence, you should have something from the thesis statement, some keyword or phrase that you use to continue to demonstrate that you are proving a point from the thesis. And that will also be true in the last sentence of every body paragraph. So just a reminder there. So looking at the corresponding part from the introduction and conclusion here, the introduction has some context, gives the name of the story that we're analyzing, or the novel in this case. And instead of previewing what's to come in the green in the introduction, we are reviewing the points that have already been made in the conclusion. So the green parts are preview in the introduction and review in the conclusion. And then you end your conclusion, and this is hard for some students, like, how do I end my whole essay? One thing to consider is to answer so what. I call it the big so what of the essay. So look at how you started the essay and then ask yourself, so what about that? That's one way. So having these back to back again can be useful for that. So looking at my first sentence or sentences, I can ask and answer, so what about this content? Another thing that you might think about is connecting back to the hook. I think if you answer so what about the thing you started with, you're going to sort of naturally connect back to the hook. But remember the triangle idea. With the conclusion, we start specific. It's a right side up triangle and goes broad. So we want to move away from the context of the novel and then apply whatever it is we've been analyzing in the novel to the human experience in general. So using this phrase, as with all people, kind of forces that to happen. So it's probably not a phrase that you want to use every time in a literary analysis, but it got the job done here. So these are two very generic introduction, conclusion paragraphs. I would expect you to add some of your own personality, flair, insight, critical thinking to make some that really are specific to your essay.